Hello my friends, so in this video we're going to be creating a simple app with Plotly Dash, something like this where you can search a stock like Tesla, you get the price, open, high, low, close, volume in the table, and then you can also get it in the chart if you want. Something simple like this with these kind of mismatched colors, but later in other videos we're going to put it on steroids. We're going to make this like the most beautiful website with like filters, with like really cool live data updates, calculations, all that good stuff. Um, and then we're going to deploy it with Python Anywhere, and this will be trademamba.com. So hope you guys enjoy it. Um, so let me just, for you guys who are not aware, Plotly Dash is like a way to create dashboards, and they have some of the coolest dashboards. You have all these really cool like geographical dashboards, like you have all these like geo stuff like maps and stuff. They have all NLP things. Let's get to the finance ones because that's what we're doing. So a lot of interesting finance dashboards and stock dashboards. They basically have like everything. So this is like the gallery they have. So they have a really strong enterprise component, like a Dash Enterprise, but also they have a strong open source. I think if you really want to create like a really good website, you probably will need the enterprise one day once you have like your website up and running. But let's do the open source because the open source itself is extremely powerful. And just to give you guys like just some little bit of like a flavor of how powerful it is. So there's like open source component libraries, right? And okay, you can do like any HTML, you can do any like anything you really want. There's like okay, there's a thing called like a dash player, right? So a dash player is like okay, cool. You can basically like uh, have like a YouTube player with volume, playback speed, all this good stuff. You can also have what I found was really cool is a dash canvas. Like I don't know, maybe your app wants like to be able to draw, and you want to draw. That's cool too. So there's like so many things. Maybe a few more interesting things that are very useful for us is we might want to have things like a downloader. So like there would be like uh, so there could be like each of these has its own section. That's just crazy. So there's like a thing where you can download things. One second. Okay, so you could do download, right? So that's cool because like let's say we have like a CSV file we want to do download CSV, or there's like upload. There's so many things. I don't want to get too much into it, but you guys get that like you can do pretty much anything. So this is one of the reasons I decided we should do Dash and not like Streamlit, for example. Plus, it's easier and more flexible to deploy. It's built on Flask. So so like if you want to go like hardcore, you can go to the Flask part. Okay, so let's get started with our simple example. So the goal of the video, of course, is to introduce Dash and to create that simple Yahoo Finance dashboard I showed you earlier. So, like most of my videos, we're going to be working in Jupyter. So make sure you have the latest version of Dash. You need that for Jupyter. So you do pip install upgrade Dash, and then you click it. I have the link, and there's only one thing that's missing with the Jupyter Dash as opposed to the regular Dash. The only thing that's missing is that you can't have multi-page apps, but otherwise you have everything. So like I recommend doing things in Jupyter, and then when you have a multi-page app, that's when you would go to the other one, because like Jupyter makes it so much easier to go back and forth. The other one, like if you go straight from your IDE, you're kind of like it's kind of like hard to go back and forth. Okay, so let's get started. So basically, I'm going to talk about like the main things you need for a Dash app. So the first thing is the layout of the app, and then in the layout of the app, you put all these Dash components. It can be HTML. It can be what's called Dash core components like graphs and tables, for example. And that's your layout. And then you have callbacks. Callbacks basically tells you like, okay, if you click something or if you select something from a slider or a drop down, how is it going to switch the dashboard? How is it going to change the dashboard? So we're going to go step by step. So first, let's talk about the layout. So all the dash apps at first, and this is of course the simplest example. You do app equals dash, right? And then to run it, you do app.run. That's the simple dash app. But we don't have anything here. Okay, we need the layout. So what is the layout? The layout is like app.layout. And for app.layout, what you do is you define some sort of HTML element for the layout. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with HTML, but like a div is sort of like a container, like it groups of elements together. A div can have like a group of elements together. So those elements are called children. So you have children equals, and then you have a list of things. So the most simplest thing with HTML is called h1, which is heading 1. So in Plotly, you do something like this: html.h1, that's the heading, and let's call it trade mamba. Okay. So now you do app.run, it says trade mamba. Okay. But let's add another child. We'll call it html.h2 because eventually we want to select ticker. Oops. Ticker. Uh, okay. So it looks like this, right? So we have our div that groups things together, and then we have our children, and then one by one it renders. Heading 1 is the biggest one, heading 2 is the second biggest one, and that's a simple dash app, Trade Mamba or Hello World. Okay, so now let's add to it by doing one of what's called dash core component. We're gonna add a drop down, and this is a drop down to select stock to choose. So let's just pick some random stocks. Let's do symbol list. Let's do the usual suspects. Let's do Tesla, Nvidia, AMD. Let's do Meta, and let's do Rivian. Let's throw in Baba. Okay, so that's symbol list. Okay, so to get a drop down, we need to add to this layout, and we want to add the drop down, right? So let's show you how to add the drop down. So we still have this layout, but now we want to add a third thing that's going to be a drop down. So what is a drop down? You do dcc.dropdown, and then options. That's weird. Options equal symbol list, and then let's give a default value. I guess let's add spy and QQQ is always good. So, because let's make the default value spy. That seems like a reasonable default value. So I'll do value equals spy, right? I think my keyboard is broken. Forgot comma. Okay, symbol list. Oh. Okay, so now if I do app run, I see that now, okay, I have the drop down. It doesn't do much, but like the select ticker thing works. Okay. So now that we have the drop down, we needed, we needed two more things. We wanted the chart and the table. So let's add the chart first. So in Plotly, if in Dash, we work with Plotly. So we're going to need to eventually use Plotly or Plotly graph. So let me show you guys how to do that. We're going to add another DCC component. DCC component called graph. So let me show you how to do that. So let's copy this again, and now we're gonna add a graph, but we're actually gonna initialize it with nothing because we want the callback to control it. You probably in a real app should want to initialize it because you don't want like an awkward silence the first 2 seconds. Although in real life you'll never have it because it'll be deployed before anyone sees it. But anyways, to add the graph, the dash core component graph, you do dcc.graph. And I didn't mention the ID. I wrote an ID on the graph. ID is called stock plot. This is important because when I have a callback, I need to it needs to run on certain things. But how is the callback going to know what to run on? So it knows what to run on via these ID fields. So so let me actually write ID equals let's call this stock picker or whatever. ID equals stock picker. And now let's see how it looks like. Now you have, so we have a graph. I told you it's a graph with nothing. It's not initialized yet, so it's like an empty Plotly graph. Okay, so we also wanted a table. So let's again copy this and add the table. Okay. So okay, so let's add the table. The table is in something called dash table. So we can do dash table dot data table ID. Let's call it data table. And there's also another argument I would use, page size equals, let's say 20. This means that you have up to 20 rows. Here I had 10, but like let's just do 20, and then let's see how the app looks. You have nothing because nothing's initialized yet. We didn't call the callback once. Data table. Okay. So now let's add some callbacks to make this thing actually work and make some sense. So just an aside, if you've seen a lot of my other videos, like I've done a lot on Yahoo Finance. So the simplest way to get data from Yahoo Finance is you first of all pip install this library Y Finance, and then data equals yf.download the ticker. And if you want the whole period as opposed to like a date range, you write period equals max. And auto adjust equals true means adjust for dividends. Since it automatically gets it as an index, date is an index column. I did reset index here to make date in a non-index column. And then, so this function just gets data from Yahoo Finance. So you give it a ticker like Tesla, and then you get the data. This is just like a helper function we're going to use later. Okay. So now let's get to the meat of everything. So the meat of everything is the callback. Okay. So just a quick aside is you always have to have your app equals dash thing before you define the callback. Here I'm not rewriting app equals dash in every cell, but like if you do, make sure your app equals dash is above it, otherwise it's not gonna work. So anyways, so for the callback, you're gonna basically use this like decorator called I always forget what these things are called, app.callback. So and then you're gonna define you have okay, so you have app.callback like this, and then you're gonna have your outputs and inputs. So there's gonna be a list and a list. Okay, so the output it's gonna be a list, and it's gonna be like output and then this. And by the way, if it's just one thing, you can get rid of the you don't need if it's just one input, you don't need this square bracket. You can have this. We're gonna have one input because our only input is gonna be the drop down thing, but we're gonna actually need 3 outputs, and I'll explain why in a second. Because so like we have 3 outputs, and then we're gonna need an input. So okay, so remember I told you the input has a oops, why does this not work? Oh, because I don't know how to spell. Okay, so remember what I told you guys? So there's a component ID. This is what we called in here. This was the ID equals stock picker. So if I write ID equals stock picker, this means this is gonna be like the input, what we're using. Okay, so if ID equals stock picker, and then I do something like there's component property equals value, and value is going to be the value. So it's going to be, let's say, SPY at first. But when the drop down changes, it changes the value. So value refers to this argument here. Okay? So that's what's the component property. It's called value. Okay. So that's the input. Okay. So the output, so we actually need 3 things. So one is, for the first one is easy. It's for the graph, right? So how you do it for Plotly figures is you do you have the component ID same as expected. It's gonna be it's gonna be stock plot. How did I do it? Let's do underscore to make it easier. Stock plot. Okay. Oops. And then the component property, if it's a graph, the component property is going to be figure. Okay, and then the other two things we need actually two things for the data table. So let me show you guys for a second. Did I spell component right? Component. Component. Okay. So these are gonna have the same component ID. What do we call this component ID? Data table. Okay. Data table. Data table. But we're gonna have to change two properties. So if you look at data table, to be honest, you only need to change one in this case. But like, let me show you what I mean. Is like, okay, so for data table, how you define a data table is you have you have the data, and the data is gonna be like, so you know what? Maybe the best way to do it is I'll show you a data table example they have. So I'll write data table. So maybe I can show you a basic data table. Oops. Okay. So I probably should have done this like this. This is an example from what they have. Okay. So a data table is like this. Okay. So they have a data frame, and let's just not write the app twice. Let's do so this is like a data table example for intuition. Okay. So I'll write data table example. So what do you have? You have a data frame. Oops. What did I do? Debug equals true. Okay. So what do we need for the data table? So let's just not get into too much details, but what you have here is you have data equals df.toDict records. Just if you have a data frame, just do this. We don't need to get into details. But the important thing is this is the date what data is set to, and that's the data you have. These are the actual data. And then you're gonna have a thing called columns here equals this. So we're gonna need to adjust the data and the columns attribute. To be honest, we don't really need to adjust the columns attribute because it's gonna be the same for every ticker. So we really don't need to. But like you can imagine a situation where like you have stocks and options, or you have some stocks that have more columns than another. Let's say some stocks have like a weird additional column. So anyways, that might be a reason. But anyways, this will change the columns part, and this is going to change the what was it called? It was called data part, the data thing. Okay, so remember, data table is the ID, and data and columns are these parameters, and that's what we're gonna have to return. So our function is gonna have to take as input a value which is related to this stock picker. So in our case, the default was like SPY, and then it has to return three things: a figure, data, and columns. So let's show you how it's done. And I don't know if I explained this good enough, but we'll have a whole video on callbacks, I guess. Diff update graph ticker. Remember the input, and then let's do this. Let's do df equals get data from Y Finance ticker, and then that's our ticker. And then let's do a plotly graph, px.line data equals df, x equals date, y. Let's just plot the closing price. That's the figure, and then let's sort the values just because I want to because the data table, I want it the most recent values to be first. So I'll do sort values, date ascending equals false. I guarantee you I made a mistake. In place equals true. That's probably a good idea. And then I will do columns. This is the columns part. So the columns, if we just copy this example, it has name, ID, and it basically calls it the same as this. So let's honestly just copy this like here, and this will be our columns. And like I said, you probably could have just done this once because In our case, everything's the same. Everything has open, high, low, close, volume, date. But anyways, I just decided to make it general. So you have the columns here. And then you don't just have the columns, you need the data also. So what do you need in the data? That's going to be the df.toDict. Let me just show you how it looks like here. Let's copy and paste. You know what? df.toDict records. It's going to be the same thing here. Okay. Uh, uh, okay, so that's data. So now we have to return all three things. So let's return fig, um, columns. No, sorry, fig data columns because that's the order, right? Fig and then data and columns. Uh, oh. Okay, so now we have the callback. So now let's see how it looks. So we copy the app layout from above, but now with the callbacks. Okay, so the app layout above, it was like this, and we'll do app.run, and then let me just write this aside to keep it organized. So like this. So data actually should be called data frame. And let's just actually redefine the app every time, just to make sure there's no problems. So let's run it, and now you see, okay, now it works. So it's kind of ugly. We have like a plot, spy, and then spies things. Notice we have 20 because we did page page is 20, and you can choose meta. You can choose my favorite, and you can see it changed everything. But notice page is 20 because we did page size equals 20. Okay, so now we have this. So now let's just do one more thing to make it a little bit nicer is maybe let's make these into tabs. So remember in the example I showed you guys, we had tabs like this tab and that tab. And by the way, you can always view these apps if you do you can do local host 850. And you can view it on localhost 850. Okay. So maybe I'll write it here. Note can view on localhost 850. Okay, so you can always view on localhost 850 if you want it in the browser. Okay. So now let me show you tabs, like tabs, so we can make it like in this one where you have like this tab and that tab. I think that would be nice to do. So a way to add tabs is we need to use this thing called dcc.tabs. Okay. So how are we gonna do that? We are going to we're going to define tabs equals dcc.tabs. And then tabs takes a children thing. So we're going to define the children. And the children are going to be individual tabs. So it's going to be, children is going to be a list. And each thing is going to be dcc.tab. So one tab. And then another tab because we want one for the graph and one for the table. So for the graph, we'll do dcc.tab. Call it a label, we'll call it chart, and then for the table we'll call it label, we'll call it table, and here we're going to give what it is. So children here is going to be equal to, for the table it's going to be the dash table. So remember the dash table above, let's copy that in a second, and the children here is going to be the dcc.graph. So let's look above here. So so remember we have the app layout, and so the graph is going to be dcc.graph. So children is going to be dcc.graph stock plot. So here like this, might be off by a comma, should be fine. And then the children here is going to be the data table for the other one. So it's going to be like this. And remember we had the page equals 20, That was like the 20 of these things. I think I mentioned that twice. Okay, so now children equals this guy. Okay, so now we have this guy and we have this guy. So we have now the tabs, right? Okay, so now that we have the tabs, we have the tabs. So let's update the layout. So the layout is going to be similar to above, except we're going to remove the graph and the table, but we're going to add the tabs. So we're not going to need the last two, but we're going to need tabs. So let's add tabs. Oops. And again, even though we removed it, the tabs also has the graph and the table, and it has their IDs. So the callbacks will still work. Okay. So now tabs is like this. We go like this, and see we have these nice tabs here. Okay. So now as the last step is let's add some like fancy color. By the way, whenever you have something called label, it's usually some text label like chart and table. But anyways, you can add any style you want using the style thing. Okay, so maybe a first thing for style is let's make the trade mamba in the center, right? So how do you do that? So you can style based on the div. The div is like the group, or you can go to the individual layer or the big layer. You have a bunch of options on like which level you want to style, how granular. So I don't want to get into too much detail, but basically the styles are in these types of forms. You have like a background color, padding, all these options, border, all these things like that, font size, that sort of thing. So let me just big picture say a few things. Okay, so first thing is like I said, maybe we don't want to call the app Trade Mamba. We want to call it Yahoo Finance App. So we our H1 or header 1, we have Yahoo Finance, and then we have the style. We set style equal to text align. Each of these elements has a style thing. So the div has a style and its components like H1. The div within the div has a style. So you can do whatever you want. So like here I had the style text align is center. So this is centered. So then in other things, like I had for the tab, I had a style. So there's two styles for the tab. So the tab, there's a selected tab, which is this one. That would be this red color, and then the purple one is now unselected. So there's like two things. There's like a tab style and a selected style. A style for the regular one and for the selected one. And so like you write the style, of course, as these dictionaries, and then you have like a style for the graph. So graph style equals this background color. So you write it style equals that. Each element or group of elements has a style. I don't want to get into too much detail. You kind of just want to play with it and get the style you want. This is obviously not that nice style, but we'll make a lot of really good videos on this and deploy a website. So if you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much. Peace.